Hello and welcome to Books on the Go, a podcast where we talk about our book of the week. And I'm Baillie-Karas, and I'm here with my special guest today, Louise Adler, Director of Adelaide Writers Week. Hi, Louise.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
It's great to have you with us. And Louise, this might be, if I can get it to work, my first vodcast, because we're on video as well. And I haven't done this before, but my kids tell me this is very simple, that I can then upload the video to my YouTube channel. So we could also be on YouTube. But for the time being, I'll certainly upload it as the podcast. So my Books on the Go listeners shouldn't notice any change. So we're here to talk about some of the highlights of the Adelaide Writers Week program, which is my favourite week of the year, as everyone could guess. And coming up on March the 4th to the 9th, here's the program. I've got my background blurred, so that seems to blur everything. So I'm clearly need to finesse my Zoom skills and my vodcasting skills. But Louise, tell us I know it's very hard to pick favourite children and all of that, but just to start off with, do you have 2 or 3 of your favourites from the program that you would recommend for people?
Well, first of all, I really do hope people come to hear a conversation between Sir Tom Stoppard, his biographer, Dame Hermione Lee, and Professor Glyn Davis, who's now Secretary to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. That's a conversation that Glyn Davis went over to the UK to record during his Christmas holidays. And we'll watch that broadcast, that video recording at the Town Hall, the Adelaide Town Hall, on the 2nd of March. And that will be followed by an in-person live conversation with Simon Phillips, who's the internationally renowned theatre director, and Susie Miller, who is the wonderful playwright who wrote Prima Facie and the play about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who are both Stoppard devotees. And so Tom Stoppard will join us on screen live from London, because it's a very long way to travel to Adelaide. And I think that'll be a very special conversation. And I was interested in these great British playwrights like Sir Tom Stoppard and Sir David Hare, that I'll talk about in a moment, because of their writing. I mean, we could have lots of discussions with those 2 playwrights about their theatre and the craft of writing for the theatre. But it was really about theatre and about writing that I was really intent on. So David Hare will be joining us in person on Sunday at the Town Hall again, and he will read. He says he's going to read. I think he won't be able to help himself, and he'll perform his COVID monologue, Beat the Devil, and then he'll be in conversation with Don Watson, who I think of as our chief ironist in Australia, a wonderful Australian writer. And so I think that'll be a very special conversation.
I'm excited.
I could go on. I've got other. Shall I go on? I could go on all day.
I know. Well, I've read I'm reading the Tom Stoppard biography by Hermione Lee at the moment. So I'm doing my homework, Louise.
Very good. I know. You are a diligent reader. No, you're a bibliophile, and you read far more than I do. And I'm very keen to have discussions about writing and literature, because my favourite reading is the novel. And so I'm really delighted we have Louise Kennedy, who won the Irish Book of the Year award for her wonderful debut novel, Trespasses. And there we are. There it is. Gorgeous cover too. It's a wonderful novel. Louise Kennedy was a chef in her prior life, and this is her first novel, and it's been received with great acclaim and lots of awards. So I'm really delighted she's coming to the festival. John Banville, who listeners to your podcast would remember, I think he won't mind if I say that he responded to my invitation with alacrity, but had to confess that he's not very comfortable flying, and that he has to imbibe quite a lot in order to get on the plane, and therefore he's not really compos mentis when he arrives at the other end. So we're allowing him to live stream from his home in Ireland.
Yes.
So there's some of my favourites, but there's something for everybody in the festival.
It's funny, actually, that you just mentioned 2 Irish authors, because Sean Mooney, who's a listener of the podcast, commented when I posted something about the program, he's about to read Trespasses, and we did Trespasses on the podcast recently, absolutely loved it, by Louise Kennedy, and he's doing it next month for an Irish readathon. So there you go, all the Irish books.
You go, that's wonderful. Wonderful.
That's right.
And if we're talking matters Irish, I should say that Fintan O'Toole, who's one of the great non-fiction Irish writers and columnists and essayists, will also be joining us. So I think we're going to have a rich variety of writing from around the world.
That's right, as always. And one of the things I love about Adelaide Writers Week is it's held in the gardens at the Pioneer Women's Memorial Gardens, and the sessions are free. During the daytime sessions are all free. And so what you can do is wander in, and you don't have to book, which means you don't have to pick, which I would then just pick an author who I knew, because that's a safe bet and so on. And so instead you can just go down and listen to a session and then wander over and listen to what's happening on the other stage. And you always find the authors that you weren't expecting are sometimes the most compelling. So tell us, who are some of the authors we might discover who are new to us? Because that's one of my favourite things about Writers Week.
I couldn't agree with you more. I do find that myself. I always remember going to a Melbourne Writers Week and going to a session that was in one of the auditoriums, and it was the writer speaking was a petite, grey-haired lady, not a quiet demeanour, understated demeanour and manner. And I was just really intrigued by her. I had never heard of the writer. Her name was Carol Shields, and she was talking about her new novel at that time, The Stone Diaries. And I found it so interesting that it took me straight to the book tent to buy all of her books. I started with The Stone Diaries, which is a magnificent novel, I think. And I read my way through her entire oeuvre. And I think that's, for me, like you, Anna, part of the joy, not just of meeting people we've been reading for years and hearing them, but also discovering new voices. So one of the new writers that I think would be very interesting, who unfortunately is live streaming from London, is Alison MacLeod, who's written this fabulous novel. I don't want anyone to be put off by the fact that it's not short. In fact, you and I can confess, Anna, that it's 600 pages. I think it's 600 pages. Utterly engrossing. I could not put it down. A wonderful novel about D.H. Lawrence writing Lady Chatterley's lover.
Is that tenderness?
Tenderness. And so it's D.H. Lawrence writing Lady Chatterley's lover. The American attempts to block the distribution of that novel in America, and Jackie Kennedy. I won't say any more. I just think it is a superbly engrossing, beautiful lyrical read. So that's one author I hope people will discover.
I really loved that, and I had not expected to necessarily. I thought it looked, again, quite long. I wasn't a huge aficionado of D.H. Lawrence, but you don't need to be. It's really, really immersive. Yeah.
Really immersive. And I don't know whether you like the form, but I love literary biographies. And I'm very interested in what makes a great literary biography. Is it that you meet that it's the writer's life that unfolds for you? Is it the writing that you kind of, you read about, the novels or the, poetry or whatever the form is? Or is it the relationship of the writing and the life? And so we've got a very significant session with Helen Garner's biographer, Shirley Hazzard's biographer, and a number of others joining us for a discussion about the life or the work in terms of literary biography. And I think that's a very rich topic for discussion.
And I think Shirley Hazzard, is one of those authors, and I'm fascinated to hear about the biography, which I haven't read yet, but I feel like she's under the radar. So in terms of new discoveries, I hope that discussion prompts people to rush into the tent to read The Transit of Venus or The Great Fire, as well as the biography of her, because I think she's flown a bit under the radar in Australia.
Yes, and the biography by Brigitta Olubas has had fantastic reviews internationally, and everyone I know who's read the biography has then gone straight back to reading, as you say, The Transit of Venus or The Great Fire or any of the other novels that Shirley Hazzard wrote. So it's very interesting how it pulls us back to the writing.
It does. And she did have an interesting life. She worked with the UN, didn't she, for a while? And she lived in New York, as well as, I think, traveling to Italy. I've got some vague memories. So then in terms of what are the ingredients of a literary biography, I think you want them to do something a bit interesting apart from sitting in the room, don't we? But
Correct. We like when they get out and about and even behave badly. It's very interesting.
Yes. And tell me, Louise, because there's been some the program has launched now, so we're very excited. There's been some publicity, and of course, there's been some drama, and I'm here for all the controversy and all the drama. But tell me, how challenging do you find it to provide a program that allows for free speech and lively debate and some really thought-provoking debate, and try to walk that line between not offending people, or how do you go about that?
I think it's very difficult. And I've been thinking about the idea that seems to be all pervasive now in our society, which is that we need to offer people safe spaces, and trigger warnings need to be issued, and support needs to be offered for people who may be disturbed or confronted or upset by discussion. And I guess my starting point is that I would hope Adelaide Writers Week is a place for civil discussion and respectful debate, number one. Number two, that we welcome a diversity of views, that we don't all have to agree in order to have a constructive debate. Our minds might be changed. Our opinions may be affirmed. We may think, well, I'm absolutely 100% right. Or, well, maybe I need to think anew about that. That's a different perspective. So that's what I would hope and aspire to create at Adelaide Writers Week, a space in which people are not necessarily safe. They're not unsafe. I don't want people to feel unsafe, but that we have courageous spaces, brave spaces in which we debate with honesty and courtesy and consideration ideas that might be challenging.
And you have to be uncomfortable sometimes, I think, to confront some of these big ideas. I think people have to accept that they'll be uncomfortable, and you don't want to be in an echo chamber.
No, but I think there's a sort of suggestion we only want to talk to those people who agree with us. Well, I think if that's where we land, then there's no place for public discourse, public conversation. The public square is debased. And I do think we have to remind people, if this subject is upsetting to you, you don't have to come. This is, first of all, as you rightly said, we're in the gardens. You can leave a session. You can not come to that session. You know, some people are deeply upset by, I'm a Jewish person. I have, families my family was deeply affected by the Holocaust. And I watch everything and read everything that I can about the Holocaust. I have friends of my generation who don't want to read anything that's profoundly upsetting. That's your prerogative. No one is forcing you to be there. So, and I think that's important that we allow people to, A, to have different opinions, and B, not to be present.
And they haven't lost any money because it's all free. So that's
correct.
That's the advantage.
Correct.
Yes. No, I second that for sure. So I think, and I've always found Adelaide Writers Week is that place. It does get a variety of views, and that's one of the things we celebrate. So I'm looking forward to it. And Louise, before we go, tell me, what are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading at the moment? I've just bought, because I can't find my copy of The Great Fire, because I want to return to Shirley Hazzard. So that's what I'm about to read.
Great.
And what are you reading, Anna? What are you reading at the moment?
Well, I'm reading the Tom Stoppard biography.
Oh, yes. Excellent.
Which is, that will keep me going for a while.
It's not a slim volume. It's not a slim volume.
No.
But she's a wonderful biographer. I mean, she's, she's interesting. Hermione Lee, in the conversation that you'll hear on 2nd of March at the town hall, she talks about how she actually usually prefers to write biographies of dead people, and that when she was writing Sir Tom Stoppard's biography, she had to imagine he was dead. And there's this lovely exchange where he says, quite right too, and she laughs. It's just gorgeous.
Well, because he's very sharp. He's quite, not in a mean way, but he's got a very sharp sense of humor, and he's very he wouldn't let you get away with anything. So you'd be worried constantly if you said something wrong or did something wrong. He'd be onto it like a flash. I can imagine how intimidating that would be.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but only Hermione Lee is probably up to that, I'd say.
Indeed.
Well, thank you, Louise, very much for taking the time to speak with us today. I know it's a hectic week in the lead up to Writers Week, which starts, well, the Tom Stoppard event is the 2nd of March, isn't it? And then Saturday, the 4th of March, it begins in the Gardens. So really looking forward to it. And we will see you down in the Gardens. Thank you.
And thank you so much for having me on, Anna. I really appreciate the time.
Bye.